We are your home theater and AV questions answered. This is AVRant. Want your home theater or AV question answered by Tom and Rob? Send it to question@avrant.com. Welcome to another edition of AVRant. I'm Tom Andrew, and I'm here with
Rob H. This is AVRant. It's your home theater and AV questions answered. There was that May Windows update, which of course, got done. And then the thing that has to break is my Microsoft branded webcam, as it always does. The reason I got a Microsoft branded webcam, which I do not like, was to avoid it breaking after Windows updates. But of course it did.
Logitech never breaks. I don't know what's wrong with yours.
Well, I had an old Logitech that got broken, and I need a new one.
You should fix it. You get a new one.
Yes, I should. In any case, if you are watching the complete YouTube video this week, it's not going to be a normal video because I couldn't get Minicam working in the couple of minutes that I had to try and do that. So it's just going to be the YouTube live feed. I'm only going to try and screen share the very most important pictures, and thankfully we don't have a ton of pictures to actually show this week that are actually important to see, so that's going to be a whole thing. This isn't going to be the most polished video, but for audio listeners, doesn't matter. It's still going to be the audio, and that's all good. So there you go. Everybody has been warned. Ta-da.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I'm going to cough, probably. Mm-hmm. Certainly. Almost guaranteed. This kid's got out of school and I immediately got a cold. So,
right. Yes.
And so did one of my children and so did my wife. So it, kind of went around. A bunch of my friends have also been sick. Just mild cold, lasted for a couple of days. And now I got to deal with the cough and the runny nose for the next, 2 weeks as I finally gets completely out of my system. So sorry about that.
Sounds fun.
Apologize in advance for any gross bodily sounds you may hear.
All right.
This is AVRant, the podcast that answers your home theater and AV questions. To get your questions answered, all you have to do is ask. You ask by emailing us a question at avrant.com. Go to www.avrant.com. You can leave us a comment there. Facebook.com/avrantpodcast. Good place to contact us. YouTube.com/avrant. Contact us directly. Rob at avrant.com. His Twitter is at FirstReflect. I'm Tom at avrant.com. My Twitter is at avrant_Tom.
And since I didn't bring up the graphic, question at avrant.com. That is the place to send your questions to our email, question@avrant.com once again.
Yeah, that's us.
That's it.
I mean, I think sometimes I even put it in the show the show notes, the post that goes out on Facebook and everything. Yeah. So I understand why people aren't Facebook users. I can get that.
Yes.
But compared to YouTube, Facebook seems awfully innocuous. It's so easy to build yourself a little community of people who all agree with you, which is great for the racists, but it's also great for people like me who just want to not have to listen to racists all the time.
Wouldn't that be a treat?
I live in Florida, dude. I listen to racists at the grocery store. Is that what you're going to do? All right, let's thank our listeners of the week. To become a listener of the week to support the podcast in some way. One of the ways you can do that is financially by going to patreon.com and signing up for a monthly subscription. This is like a continuing support for our podcast every month. They'll take a minimum of $1 and a maximum of infinity dollars out of your bank account and give most of that to us. So we want to thank our 81 patrons from that we currently have, including Travis, who let us know that he was one of our new or whatever, continuing
recurring.
Patrons.
He is a recurring patron. Yeah, that's patreon.com/avrant podcast. If you'd like to sign up, you can think of it like an automatic monthly donation. Thanks very much to our 81 patrons over there, including Travis.
Yeah, we want to thank Alvin, who went to he said he decided to go with the Onkyo TX RZ730 receiver since he wants to try Atmos, and the RZ730 is the least expensive option with a full set of pre-outs and the ability to expand to 7.2.4 if he wants to. He bought it from Accessories for Less and let Mark over there know it was an AVRant recommendation. So thank you, Alvin, for talking us up to Accessories for Less.
Yeah, Alvin, congrats on that purchase. Thanks for talking us up to Accessories for Less and Mark over there. And for anybody who would like to make a one-time donation, donation, not a recurring donation, you can do that via PayPal. Come to our website, avrant.com, which is back up and running now that it's the beginning of the month.
Don't even talk to me about that website.
Yep. But over on the right-hand side, it says support AVRant, and there's a graphic of a cup of coffee there with our little AVRant logo in it. You click on that, it'll take you to PayPal, where you can, of course, use a PayPal account if you have one, but if you do not want to sign up with PayPal, you can just enter a credit card number, and that'll send us a one-time donation via PayPal if you'd like to support us financially that way.
Thank you. Yes. And there's a 100% chance I'm going to have to exit this podcast. I'm looking around this room because I know there's Kleenex in this room. And they're not showing themselves to me, so I'm going to have to go locate them. Oh, man, dude. I am over this cough.
It is going to be.
We're not professional. I mean, that's just
we are definitely not professional.
This is an amateurish podcast. So I told you guys a couple of weeks ago that I started listening to Night Vale. Welcome to Night Vale. It's a podcast that I found on Pandora. It's like supported by PRX, which is like the public radio, whatever. It's a anthology series about, you know, a radio. It's basically like a radio station in a town called Night Vale, where they say the tagline is all the conspiracy theories are true.
Okay.
So I've been watching. I listened to it. In the car. It's something different to do, and the kids kind of like it. It's perfectly innocuous. There's lots of gory details, but nothing that I would consider to be, you know, not children appropriate. You know, they understood the words. It might not be, but most of them aren't going to get some of the. By the time they can understand the words, they're big enough to understand the words, if that makes sense. So it's been all right. I mean, I don't particularly like the guy who does the narration. I don't like the way he over enunciates everything. It's just a little annoying to me, but I can half-heartedly recommend it. I mean, there's a couple of really good episodes, but you know, just, all in all, it's just kind of okay. It's better than the news. That's what I got. So
okay. I understand.
Tidbits from Apple's WWDC. What is that again? The WWDC?
Worldwide Developer Conference.
Oh, okay. What would? And I was like, none of those are Steve Jobs. So
they are not.
What would Steve Jobs do? Apple TV will support Xbox One and PS4 controllers. In case you were wondering how you're going to play those Apple Arcade subscription service games, the new Mac Pro was announced. The lowest price is $6,000.
Yes, that is the entry price for the lowest configuration you can possibly put together.
If you add every possible option to upgrade, it could cost over $45,000, or a Lexus.
Yeah, you can get a lot of things for $45,000, including a fully tricked out Mac Pro.
With Apple's Afterburner hardware acceleration card, video editors can simultaneously stream 12 4K RAW video streams or 3 8K RAW. It's RAW, stands for something, right?
I mean, that's just uncompressed video.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Video streams from their sources. There will be a rack-mountable version as well as for the what? For the
Mac Pro. No.
For the Mac Pro?
For the Mac Pro, there's going to be.
Why would you want to rack mount it? Where you put the monitor?
Well, hey, if you're getting fully tricked out $45,000 ones, you're getting yourself a rack, I guess. It's for the pros. Yes.
The new 32-inch Pro Display XDR has 6K resolution because that's something everybody's been clamoring for. It's a full array local dimming LCD that can sustain 1,000 nits indefinitely across the entire screen. So if you ever wanted to go blind at your computer screen, we can do that for you. It can hit 1,600 nit peaks. The price is $5,000. You can add a stand for $1,000. What's it made out of? Titanium?
Better be more than that. Titanium's not that expensive.
So, yes, the stand will allow you to rotate it into portrait mode so you can look at your photos in the proper orientation.
So you can look at your selfies, man. You need them 6K selfies on a I don't know what. Everybody's like, why does this stand cost $1,000? Like, oh yeah, you can move it up and down and tilt the screen and also rotate it into portrait mode. You know what else can do that? A ton of other monitors that don't charge you $1,000 separately just for the stand. So nobody has any idea. Also, everything about the Mac Pro and the back of the Pro Display XDR monitor, they look exactly like cheese graters. They're like, these are specially designed to get rid of all the massive amounts of heat that both of these things put out, but they look like cheese graters. I'd show you the image, but all my stuff is screwed up. You can, I'm sure you've seen it by this point if you're listening to this podcast. In any case, yeah, $5,000 for a 32-inch display. So I'm like, there are, 65-inch flagship Samsungs that can basically do all this same stuff for less than that amount of money. It's a lot of money for this display.
It's not 6K though.
It is not 6K, right? It'd only be 4K.
Because what I really want in a monitor is it has to scale everything no matter what.
Right.
Like I can't give it 4K? Native resolution. No.
4K, gotta scale it. 8K, gotta scale it down.
Gotta scale it down. Yeah. That's what I want. That's what I look for in a monitor. Is the inability to take a signal and just give me that signal. Yeah.
Well, no pixel for pixel for you.
So the iTunes app is no more. It's split into 3 apps now: music, TV, and podcasts, which is fine. Whatever. I don't really care about that.
I guess so, except for the fact that, so if you've ever imported a podcast that you just downloaded elsewhere as an MP3 file, if you ever imported that into iTunes, getting that to actually show up in your podcast feed, what a fun adventure that is. And then, so I don't know how this is going to work. You open this podcast app, is it going to let you import stuff that you just downloaded? I don't know.
When is that supposed to roll out? Because it's not on my Mac right now. I still have iTunes.
It's when the new Mac OS rolls out, whenever that.
So don't upgrade.
Not right away. Yeah. Not if you like to listen to podcasts. I'd take a wait and see approach.
So LG's 88-inch 8K Z9 OLED is available for pre-order for $30,000.
Yes.
That seems about right.
8K, 88-inch OLED, $30,000.
It sounds. I mean, they should have made it like $80,000, so that all they had.
$88,000.
$88,888.88.
Yes, they should have. Somebody would have paid it.
Isn't 8 like a really super lucky number in China?
Yeah.
So, anyways, okay. For comparison, Sony's 85-inch Z9G 8K LCD is $13,000. So,
more than twice the price to go OLED.
There's a little bit of leverage. Samsung's 85-inch 8K QLED is $15,000. And although Samsung also has an 82-inch 8K QLED for only $10,000, it's $9,000 on sale right now. The 98-inch 8K LCD and QLEDs jump way up to $70,000.
Yeah.
So
both Sony and
LG's
Samsung.
pricings. I mean,
Samsung have 98 inchers.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, it seems weird to come in here so high. I mean, honestly, by itself, an 80-inch 8K brand new whatever. I mean, 30K is about what these things start to hit the market at. But if you're already on the market, there's already models in the market that are half that or less. I don't see how you can come in there.
Yeah, I mean, so like $15,000 for the Samsung 85-inch. So this is 3 inches larger diagonally. I guess they can say they can charge a little bit more for that, but literally twice the price. Yeah,
that seems Apple prices. Who do you think you are?
Although both the Sony and the Samsung, because they're trying to compete with OLEDs, they have that horrible, good in one way, this ultra wide viewing filter thing that they put on the thing, for the viewing angles. Both of them have that on these 85-inch sizes. So it's like, I mean, yeah, it does improve the off-axis viewing, but it also makes your blacks look
right. But this is an OLED compared to an LCD. For some reason, that didn't sink into my brain. Is that this?
Yeah, no, this is an LG.
So
OLED,
they're okay. So. Okay, yes, I see now why. It's still a huge price jump, but then the OLEDs. It is an OLED, so there is.
And
that.
we still want to see what that rollable one ends up costing, because we made guesses on that. I can't remember what either of us predicted. Somebody who remembers and heard that episode, write into us and let us know what we predicted for price. I don't know if we predicted a price on this 8K 88-inch either, but
I don't remember.
I think we did.
That, but
I don't know.
Yeah. So if you want a smaller OLED than 55 inches, because you're going to mount them on your face, LG says an 48-inch 4K resolution size is coming in 2020. Why?
There are so many people in the UK on the AV Forums podcast. They're always like, 55 inches is too big. We need something smaller, and I still want OLED. They're like, 48-inch, but not until 2020. I'm hoping for it a bit sooner, but that's when LG says it's coming.
See, that's my American-centric nature kind of pops in, and then I remember what it was like living in Australia and traveling around Turkey with visiting my wife's family and seeing all these, every place is tiny. You know, it's just sort of the aesthetic.
And given how minimal the bezels are, it's like where you used to put, say, a 37, 38-inch LCD with a big fat bezel on it. It's like a 48-inch might fit.
Right. So do you remember Sony Ultra? I don't. Do you?
It rang a bell for me. I did see Sony Ultra in headlines going back in, like, I don't know what it was, 2000, I don't know, 2014, something like that. I don't
remember that. It was Sony's 4K movie service where you could buy or rent 4K movies to stream directly to your Sony 4K TV. Now, that sounds familiar. I remember thinking to myself, that's dumb. Because
I remember it was the only way to get 4K content onto my X900A.
Right.
It was the first of the X900 series, because the X900A, while it had 4K resolution, it did not have HDCP 2.2. So there was no external 4K source that you could plug into it and actually get 4K resolution, even though it had the pixels. But through the Sony Ultra service, you could get 4K content onto that TV that was there. I remember that being the only way.
I do remember us talking about this, and I remember thinking I'm like, you can't just offer it just to Sony TV owners.
Oh, it was.
It'll fail. Case in point. Anyways, it's shutting down on July 26th. They say if you bought movies directly using the Android TV, or Windows app, you can transfer them to Movies Anywhere, which, of course, only works if you're in the United States, and everybody else can F off.
Hopefully you
are screwed.
Purchase a large Sony Ultra library. That would have been bad.
Anybody who purchased a large Sony Ultra library was really, really not thinking about it.
They wanted the 4Ks.
Yeah, whatever. Yeah. All right, some comments here. Mitch, you know what? Why don't you read this comment, and then I will go find some Kleenex. Because this is long, and I've already read it, so I can comment on it when I get back.
Sounds good. Well, Mitch says to us, in his search for a speaker upgrade over his current B&W 600 series speakers, he bought over $10,000 worth of speakers, and he had himself an audition in his house. So he got a pair of Ascend Acoustics Sierra RAAL towers, and he got a pair of RBH SV6500R, that's the signature reference towers, and a pair of B&W's 700 series, those would be the 702 S2 towers. So he brought all of those into his house, and let's see if I can share an image here, because there you go. Not a great image if you're looking at YouTube, but it gives you some little idea of all of these speakers that he had with him in his room at one time. He provided a long write-up of his impressions in an email, but to cut it all short, he had some friends over who shared their thoughts, and overall he ended up liking the B&W 702 S2 the best. It's also handy for him. He already had B&W 600 series surrounds, and he didn't feel like he needed to replace those in order to still have a very nice timbre match all around. So he's keeping his 600 series B&W surrounds and then adding the 702 towers. The Ascends for him came in dead last. He didn't like how physically small they are. He didn't like their mid-range, and he found their ribbon tweeter, in his words, a bit much. So I'm not exactly sure what that means, but overall they were not his favorite. He eliminated them quite quickly. Most of his time he spent comparing the RBH towers with the B&W 702s, and he found the RBHs, he thought their soundstage was too tall. So
not exactly sure what that means.
But that's what he was finding. He simply preferred the mid-range of the B&W 702s, and he found it the most natural, and that it had a little bit of warmth to vocals, which is a very common comment that people sometimes make about B&W speakers. So bottom line, he is very happy with his choice. He's keeping the 702s, and he'll be getting a matching center for them now, and he says his speaker upgrade search has come to an end.
This whole comment really brings home a couple of things that we've talked about in this podcast a slew of times. Mm-hmm. And it confirms to me a number of things that we have said, have warned people of and remarked over and over again. One, RBH is very neutral. RBH is a speaker that is extremely neutral, which means that, it tends to be in the running no matter what you do.
Right.
And his experience, he had B&W speakers, which are
before,
which is like his ears are kind of tuned to those. So he was, he found something like the Ascends, which have they're a flat speaker, but they are extremely accurate, and that accuracy, especially within that tweeter,
which extends really high, really linearly, and if you're not used to that, it's like, I when he says a bit much, I think that's
what
maybe what he means.
Yeah. And to me, I was like, that is so different from what he was used to.
Mm-hmm.
He was just like, that's weird. I don't like that. Which is why sometimes people come to us and say, I've had clipped speakers for 20 years.
Yeah.
I was thinking about getting some B&Ws. I'm like, no.
I mean,
you're not going to like them.
Go ahead and hear them.
Exactly.
For certain audition them, but don't buy them, sight unheard and just swap everything out like that without auditioning first, because it can definitely make a difference.
So between, as he listened to all these different speakers, what we ended up with is him getting the speaker that he really likes. That's the most important thing. That is
by far the most important thing. And nobody here is going to say, oh, bad choice, B&W 702s. It's like, no, really nice speakers, man. If those floated your boat, congrats.
So, but the most important thing that we walk away with is that, he's got peace of mind knowing that he got the speakers that he liked. From our perspective, there's, psychologically, you're predisposed towards things that you've already heard before. Sounds that sound similar to sounds that you're familiar with. So that B&Ws have a sound. They've made no bones about it, and he likes it. And that means that there's not, that he was predisposed to that. But the RBH is still stayed in the running. And the RBH, as we've always said, is a very neutral speaker. So I think that's why. And then while the Ascends are a very, they're flat, they're very accurate almost to a fault. When he might say, I wouldn't say that, but he might say that. So
he had comments as well about, he's saying, okay, they're going to be crossed over to subwoofers, so he wasn't like consciously trying to pay particular attention to how deep they play, but he was playing all of these in direct mode without the subwoofers attached, just speaker to speaker. And so you can't help but, some sounds get masked if a speaker has more bass than another speaker, and you can't help but change the whole timbral tone of the speaker as a whole based on how much bass they're putting out. That does play a factor. So there's multiple things. Some of the comments he was saying, it sounded as though the visuals were playing into it as well, and that can happen. The RBH towers being the tallest of them all, and then saying that the soundstage sounded taller. I'm like, I wonder if the visuals had an impact in this, and if it had been a truly blind test. But you know what? I'm fine. What's important here is that he has the peace of mind because he's not wondering, oh, would I maybe like the RBHs more than these 702s? It's like, no, you've heard them both for yourself now.
In your own room.
In your own room. Looking at them as you will be in real life, I'm fine with all of that. It doesn't have to be a completely objective double-blind test, in my opinion, when it's a purchase decision.
No.
When it's a purchase decision, no, you're allowed to take other things into consideration, including, I just like the way these ones look better. That is entirely a valid reason. So I'm very happy for you. Thank you for the update, and congrats and enjoy.
Yeah, and I really did like how, when we kind of break down his what his background is based on, and then what his reaction to these speakers were. And you're right, the physical looks of the speaker can make a huge difference. So, and there's people like, well, you should get the one that's objectively the best. Yeah, this is not about objectivity. This is about subjectivity. He subjectively wants to have the speakers that subjectively give him the best experience.
Yep.
Therefore, that is objectively the best decision for him. So I 100% support his purchasing decision, and wish you all the best, sir. Enjoy your speakers.
Agreed.
Damien was concerned about the basement door and his new house potentially swinging into his left front speaker. So notions of an outward swinging door or a doorstop mounted on the floor were being floated. Tom suggested the idea of just putting the front left and right speakers in front of the door while making sure the angles still match Dolby's guidelines, and then simply adjusting trim levels and distance settings to compensate. And that's looking like it might be a winner. I am so sorry.
He doesn't even have the speakers out of the boxes right now.
They're literally still in the boxes. He just put the boxes there.
But he's just like, well, awesome. This is approximately the height and size of where these speakers might go. Like, just for a pure, could these even go here? He's like, oh, yeah, that's not so bad. The angles end up correct. And, yes, they're well forward of the front wall, but Who cares?
Who
The
cares?
angles are still right. You just say that your distances and your trim levels have to be set for where they end up being. So I'm really glad that worked out, because it's
that room was, that door, it was
challenge.
really irksome, man. So I'm glad that we found some way to make it work. Just make sure people run into it as they're backing their way into that room if they open that door. Ilango. A while ago, Ilango asked us for some different Bluetooth earphone recommendations since he already had to own 3 pairs of RBH Bluetooth earphones, and he just wanted to try something a little different. We mentioned RHA and Shure, and tried to keep the price point around $75 as requested. Rob did mention offhand that he likes the Shure SE215s, albeit at a higher price point. Rob, what have you done?
Hey, that was very offhanded. You can't not blame me. I was like, I like the SE215s, but here are the SE112s that fit this price point better.
I'm actually thinking of getting some in-ear Shures because you keep talking about them so much, I want some new in-ear. I'm down to 1 pair. Like I've broken a couple. My kids steal them and then break them, and or I'd say, hey, why don't you have these? These are not that expensive, and then they destroy them. All right, so the SE215s weren't ridiculously more expensive, so Ilango went for them, and he thinks they sound great. Better, cleaner bass into his ears, improvements in the mid and treble as well, so he said thanks. There you go. Good.
Well, congrats, Ilango. I'm glad you like them. How much are those? Let's see. I think they are about $125 US. So it's like a $50 premium. Yeah. Well, when you start out saying I want them $75 or under,
and I think the RBHs are like $50 these days.
That's right.
Yeah. So you're talking about
more than twice the price. So they better be better.
They should be better, right?
If they're not better at more than twice the price, then how do you justify it?
Cesar. Last week we discussed Cesar's description of how he prefers the way his phantom center sounds, as though dialogue is coming from the very middle of his projection screen, but his physical center sounded cleaner and better off-axis, and he could adjust its level independently of the front, left, and right channels, so he wants a physical center, but it no longer sounded like dialogue was coming from the middle of the screen. He could tell it was lower. We said a lot of it might be psychological, but we also mentioned that it might be early reflections. We also said we weren't sure how close he was to the back of his back wall, so maybe put some absorption behind his head. Turns out he's only 2 feet from his back wall, so he made himself some DIY absorption panels, and putting some on the back wall seemed to do the trick. He thinks his physical center speaker sounds really good now, and he fully prefers it over the phantom center, so he says thanks. And when we say something is psychological, that's literally exactly what we're talking about. I mean, it's not like, oh, you're just making it up because you're dumb. No, it's your brain is being tricked by something that's happening in the room, and we're not exactly sure what it is. And these are all the options. So
I mean, very often we're saying like something auditory is psychological. We're saying is the combination of the visual and the auditory, where since you didn't have a physical center before and now you do, your eye sees the center speaker below the screen, and your brain goes, oh, it must be coming from there because I can see it now. We were sort of leaning that way when we were talking about it, but we were also saying how usually, even if you have a center speaker right below your screen that your eyes can see, when your eyes go up to the screen and see people's lips moving, your brain puts the sound that is coming from below the screen. That's just objectively a fact. That's where it's coming from. But your brain puts that together with the people's lips moving on the screen and says, oh, that's where the sound is coming from their moving lips. So we were a little bit, normally you don't get this effect where you actually notice that the sound is coming from below, but we're like, well, could it be an early reflection thing? Could it be a reflection off the wall behind you? Because very often it is. It turns out, in his case, seems like it was. Adding the DIY absorption panels behind his head basically cured this issue. And we've had that happen with other people too, where they're like, the sound of my center speaker just isn't right. And it turns out they're 1 foot away from the wall behind them. They put absorption back there, and it doesn't necessarily make it 100%, but it helps a lot in many cases. So thank you, Cesar. Glad to hear that worked out.
Shane. Last week we talked a bit about the differences between Anthem room correction and DRAC, but much of the info we said about Anthem ARC is out of date now. Now, if Shane did not send this email to us in the, oh my God, you guys are stupid, then
he absolutely did not.
He's not a YouTube commenter. That's why we don't have YouTube comments anymore, because that's how they comment.
It was not at all. He was like apologetic. I'm like, no, you don't have to apologize, dude. We said something that isn't the way it is. By all means, we want to hear that and correct it on air.
I think the last couple of days I said I was wrong to my wife like 7 times in just the last couple of days, because I'm a human being. I make mistakes, and every time I say that, I think she's going to make a deal about the fact that I think she's gotten used to me being wrong so much that she's like, yeah, of course you are. You're an idiot. All right. The new updated ARC Genesis software came out in April. Cough.
Man.
And it's backwards compatible with almost all existing Anthem products. So now ARC Genesis can make corrections all the way up to 20 kilohertz if you want to, and there are more options for manually changing the target curve. Shane has used both ARC Genesis and Dirac, and he has no question that Dirac is very powerful and adjustable, but for a user setting up things out of the box, he thinks ARC Genesis does a much better job. Mainly, he thinks we would agree with their approach to setting up multiple subwoofers with ARC Genesis. They give you a real-time on-screen graphic of your bass response before you start the automated process. This allows you to manually set the volume and phase knob on your subwoofers themselves to get level matching and the most uniform bass response before you begin. You can move the mic from location to location, and you can adjust your subwoofers all before the automated part, all in real time. Then it treats all subwoofers as a single mono channel, and Shane thinks that leads to the best result.
Yeah, I am 100% on board with that. And we had mentioned Arc Genesis when it was announced months ago.
Don't remember that at all.
Almost completely forgot about it. And so it came out in April. So I mean, the last podcast was still at the end of May, technically. So it wasn't like there was a tremendous amount of time that it was out in the wild. But yes, thank you very much for the update. I'm sort of checking boxes, right? Well, what can other systems do that Arc has? Even if you don't really want to use it, like, do we really want to correct all the way up to 20 kilohertz? Probably not, but, well, now you can, because other people could, and if that was something that you had as a knock against Anthem room correction, well, now you can't anymore. The Genesis software now makes that all possible. So, yeah, thank you for the update. I appreciate that, and, yeah, Anthem is sounding quite promising. I like that idea of the real time with your subs before you start, so you're like, yep, I've got my bass sort of clued in now, and now we just EQ it as one bass-producing thing.
Yeah, I guess I'm gonna sort of complain.
You're gonna be the downer.
Here. I'm not a downer.
Devil's advocate.
I guess the people who can afford Anthem and the people who would want to manually adjust their bass, I don't know that they overlap as much as they should. I think that the people who can afford Anthem, hopefully, are the people who also buy this from a custom installer who will use this properly in order to get them the best.
Well, also, one of the reasons they do it this way in Anthem room correction is because Anthem and Paradigm are sister companies, right, all owned by the same guy now, and they have their Paradigm Perfect Bass Kit, which is a separate thing that is meant to help you equalize and adjust everything in your subwoofer. So the idea is use the perfect bass kit on your subs, then that becomes your one output that is fed by Anthem room correction, right? That's really, I think, what was going on with the way the thinking goes in the software. But regardless, if you follow the method that I prefer, which is exactly this, get everything level matched and uniform before you begin, and this can allow you to do that, whereas the other systems don't really do that. The way Odyssey works with dual subs, this isn't how they do it. They just time align the two subs individually. Dirac, until they get their multi-subwoofer sort of add-on out there, which as far as I know isn't out there yet. Somebody might correct me about that. Maybe it is. I really don't think it is out there yet. But right now it's just, one subwoofer output, and it doesn't necessarily do a multi-sub type of thing. So yeah, that's great. Good to know about Anthem Genesis.
So Lee says, Rob said he thought the Amazon Prime Video app on the NVIDIA Shield might only do stereo audio. That's not true. It can send out Dolby Digital Plus, including Atmos.
And Lee is absolutely correct. Confirmed that for myself. I hadn't used the Amazon Prime app on my Shield for quite a while because I'm like, well, the Apple TV does it, including with Dolby Vision, and I have an OLED that can do Dolby Vision. Yeah. So the NVIDIA Shield, now here I know for sure the NVIDIA Shield cannot output Dolby Vision from anything. It just doesn't support Dolby Vision. So as far as Amazon Prime Video goes, I still pick the Apple TV 4K as the top player for it. But yeah, no, you're absolutely right.
For whatever reason, Amazon Prime has gotten better with their lip sync, so I get to stop complaining about that. And I started watching. I only watched one episode so far with my family, but Good Omens just came out. So with David Tennant plays a demon, and some other English dude plays an angel, and they're trying to sort of stop the apocalypse from happening.
Okay.
And the first episode was quite good. So I'm excited about that.
But yeah, the Shield can do HDR10 and it can do Dolby Digital Plus all the way up to Atmos if the content has it.
Oh, I had a weird Atmos thing happen on my Xbox One. Mm-hmm. I was watching Rim of the World, which is an Atmos, which is a new short movie by Mitch G or whatever his name is, and Atmos was giving me clicking, like driver clicking. It almost sounded like drivers bottoming out, and I was like, what is that noise? And my son, who was watching the movie with me, said, I think it's part of the movie. I'm like, there is no way that's part of this movie.
Right, yeah.
So I ended up having to go to a different source to stream it that would only stream in 5.1 instead of Atmos. And that fixed it, but that was strange. So whatever. Xbox One sucks. All right. Rob also said that he's talking about you still, the 5040 UB and the new 5050 UB do not automatically switch into HDR picture modes, and that you magically put them in HDR picture mode. But when he plays an HDR source and then checks the info on his Epson 5040 UB, it clearly says the signal is Rec 2020 HDR, and it automatically switched back to Rec 709 SDR when the signal changes. There's also the dynamic range options within the advanced section of the signal menu with 2 options, audio options, 1 SDR and 4 HDR options. He would like to ask what selecting the SDR preset does and if it's an HDR, selecting the SDR preset does if it's an HDR signal. Does it convert HDR to SDR? He's tried it and everything seems to get brighter, but the info menu still says HDR. So what's the situation with HDR on the 5040 and the 5050? Was Rob out to lunch? Well, probably, but whatever.
Well, so not entirely. On this one, Lee, things are a little bit more complicated. So what's going on is that, let's say you take your Epson 5040 or 5050 out of the box and you select a picture mode. Everyone who's doing reviews and calibrations recommends actually the natural picture mode, which is a little bit unusual. But the natural picture mode has the most accurate colors and grayscale out of the box for standard definition content. So let's say you start with that. You pick the natural picture mode, you get the brightness and contrast and the color settings all adjusted for that for regular standard definition content, and then you go ahead and input an HDR10 signal. Now, it will display the image. It's not as though you get nothing or something like that. It'll display the image, and it will go into HDR mode in so much as it'll switch over to the HDR electro-optical transfer function as opposed to the regular gamma, but it doesn't go into wide color mode, and it doesn't change the brightness and contrast settings that you set for SDR. Whether you need to or not, maybe you do, maybe you don't, but the point is that when people go to calibrate for an HDR signal, they usually say, well, I do want the wide color, so now I'm going to put it into the digital cinema mode, which actually puts a physical color filter into the light path and gives you the full DCI P3 color range. In fact, it can go a little bit beyond DCI P3 color within a Rec 2020 container, and then they can calibrate what they want for their brightness and contrast settings. And a lot of people have said they actually like to increase the contrast setting when they go into HDR, because in SDR they have to leave it at the default of 50 to make sure there's no make sure that they're not blowing out the white levels at all. But then when you go into HDR, there really isn't any above white information. You just want to boost it up so that you get all the white information that you possibly can. So if you left everything in the natural mode and you never switched it, you wouldn't get the wide color, and you might be losing some highlight detail because you're not increasing the contrast setting, having different contrast values between SDR or HDR content. So really what there was coming down to is that if you're calibrating for SDR, and then you choose a different picture mode like digital cinema picture mode for HDR and you calibrate that, the projector doesn't remember that. It doesn't automatically switch between the two different picture modes when it sees SDR or HDR. It's like if you're in digital cinema mode because you've calibrated that for HDR and then you input a SDR signal, it's still in digital cinema mode and still giving you DCI P3 color instead of Rec 709 color. It's still got the physical filter in place. So they're like, reviewers are just saying, we wish there were a way that it remembered which picture mode you want. It's as simple as you set one into memory 1 on the remote and one into memory 2, and you press the button on your remote and it switches, but that's still manual. So it wasn't that HDR won't display in HDR. I needed better clarity on that, so thank you for that. But it was that, the calibration and the color in particular. You have to manually switch that. So what if you're putting in HDR and you choose that SDR preset within the dynamic range option inside of the advanced sections of the signal menu? That basically just says, okay, I'm going to show you everything in the signal that's between 0 and 100 nits, and everything above that gets clipped. So it's still an HDR signal coming in, which is why the info still says, yeah, this is an HDR signal. It is. It's just clipping everything above 100 above 100 nits. It all just fades into uniform white. So there's a ton of detail that goes missing. So it's not truly converting the HDR into SDR. It's just stopping the signal at the SDR limit.
All right.
That's
Sounds interesting. All right, let's get into the questions here. I don't know how that wasn't a question, but here we go. Yeah. Jason has been researching speakers in preparation to bring in some candidates for auditions. He's read many positive reviews of Golden Ear speakers, so they are on the short list. Most of the Triton Tower models include built-in self-powered subwoofer drivers. DefTech towers seem to have powered subwoofer drivers built in as well. He is going to have dedicated subwoofers, at least 2 that he can optimally position within his home theater. So would the powered subwoofers in the Golden Ear or the DefTech towers be completely pointless? Not completely.
No, not completely pointless.
They engage, you're going to still cross them over at 80 hertz-ish. Mm-hmm. And those powered subwoofers will cut in long before 80 hertz.
Yes.
And plus the crossover, it's not a brick wall filter at 80 hertz. Nothing, 79 doesn't get played by your towers. There's still material below that that's going to get played as well. The subwoofer, amplifiers and the drivers in there. But what you will not do is play them full range.
Yeah. The way we're going to recommend that you set them up, because it's fine if these are the speakers that you like, do audition them. He's talking about bringing things in for audition.
Yeah.
He's not talking about he's just going to buy sight unseen and that's the end of the story. So by all means, bring them in for audition. But the way we're going to recommend setting them up, you still set them to small. You still connect them with speaker wire, and you basically treat them as though they were any other normal passive pair of tower speakers. It's just that they do have a power plug that you will want to plug in, and they do have their own volume knob, which you'll need to adjust. You'll need to play some sweeps. And actually, I would probably make a sweep that cuts off at about 80 hertz so that you're not trying to get the tower playing way down into the bass while you're playing that sweep. But what you're trying to make sure is that you're not getting this big rise in the mid bass where that powered driver is playing. Because, if you look at something like the Triton 2, it's a 4.5-inch mid woofer that's in there. That's probably not playing all the way down to 80 hertz. That powered subwoofer driver on the side is kicking in higher, probably around 350, maybe 500 hertz or something like that. So that whole range is affected by the volume knob on the tower. So there is some adjustment to be made there. So you're going to want to play a sweep with just the speaker playing and try and make sure that the sweep sounds nice and linear down to about 80 hertz. But then we're still going to cross it over to your regular pair of dual subwoofers.
So if the power drivers in the towers are still useful in some way, what would be the optimal way to set them up along with his external subwoofers? Try running the towers full range? No. Don't run the towers full range.
Don't run the towers full range. Still set them to small.
Use the external subs for movies, but turn them off for music and rely solely on built-in sub drivers? No.
Nope. You're always going to have your subwoofers on.
Just set the crossover points and run everything as though the towers are just normal passive speakers. Ding, 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 ding.
That's the one. One pair of speaker wire as normal. You don't need to buy wire them. You don't need to buy amp them. You don't need to run an RCA
have a crazy idea. How about you not get speakers that have powered subwoofers in them?
It does stop all of this complication, but maybe the Golden Ear Triton towers end up being your total favorites, and they just have this wrinkle of, well, they got these power drivers, so I got to contend with them. No, you just treat them like normal passive speakers. You still set them to small. You still send one pair of speaker wire.
Doesn't Golden Ear make bookshelf speakers?
They do make bookshelf speakers
just get bookshelf
that don't have this. You could do that.
So any special wiring considerations or particular settings he would need to use when EQing this setup? No, not really.
No, just the volume knob adjustment so that you're not getting a blown over or under mid-bass range, because that is whatever the crossover is between the powered driver and the passive mid-woofer. You got to, that's going to be unique to the placement in your room. So you will have to adjust the volume knob on the towers themselves, but the wiring is just like a normal pair of passive speakers, except that your towers have a electrical plug that needs to be plugged in.
Yeah. So lastly, he asks, what's our general opinion of the Golden Ear and the DefTech towers with built-in powered subwoofer drivers? My general opinion is that they're more trouble than they're worth, and they are a relic of an age when we didn't know how to set up subwoofers.
And when the thinking was, I want full range speakers, that's the ideal.
There's literally thousands and thousands of people out there who still think that way.
Absolutely. It still very much applies to them. But if you look at the manual of, say, the Golden Ear Triton Towers and the number of setup options that they have to try and detail, because they give you the option of sending an RCA connection to that powered subwoofer section, or bi-amplifying them, or try-amplifying them in a way, as in bi-amplifying the two sections that are passive and then the self-powered section. Like, there are so many things that I'm like, yeah, if you didn't have that, you just like you plug them into the speaker wire, and that's all you really want to do. So yeah, it runs the risk of easily overcomplicating a setup that doesn't need to be, but just follow our suggestion, and it simplifies it to that point. And yeah, if you love them, that's still fine.
I feel like this is going down the road of, the thought process here, I think, is I'll use the subwoofers for movies and full range for music, and that's the thought process. I think that's the prevailing wisdom of the internets and the forums and the audiophile community.
I will only say, when you listen to music, have all the walls in your room magically disappeared, or have you taken the speakers outside into a wide open field with you? Because that is the only scenario in which you would suddenly want actual full range speakers,
and the
when you
idea
don't have a room anymore.
That somehow music is a different thing, where the music is up there and stuff. I'm like, okay, well, is the tweeter right in the exact same location that, well, if you had musicians in the room playing stuff, it would all be up front. I'm like, yeah, you're right, absolutely, 100%. And your speakers are trying to recreate that, but they're trying to recreate it accurately for the room that it was in, not they're trying to recreate a recording, not... Well, that's true. Let's just say it's a live performance, though. Let's say it's a recording of a live performance. They're trying to recreate the experience in the room that the recording was in. Yeah. So by keeping everything up front and not having your subwoofers optimally placed for even bass response across your entire area, it's actually, the unevenness of the room that it was actually in is trying to be recreated in your room, which is now made uneven by you not putting the subwoofers.
Except that when they were recording the bass, they were in a room, so that microphone, even if it was close miking techniques, which is how you get the sense that you've brought something into your room as opposed to transporting you, the listener, into a different environment. But when they were recording that bass in whatever room they were making the recording, even with close miking, it captured all of that, and there was no way to avoid it. And the only way to play it back accurately is to play the bass back linearly, which you can only do by optimally positioning multiple subwoofers within a room. You have a room. That's how it all comes back.
Remember the guy who made the speaker that it was the smaller size or bigger size because it was more the same size as the violin or something?
Oh, yes.
Remember that guy?
That's right, absolutely.
That's the same sort of flawed logic that gets people, using powered subwoofers in their tower speakers. All right, Bobby. Bobby has a 5.1 setup in a very small area using 5 Ascend HTM200 SE speakers with the SVS PB1000 sub. He's now moving his surround sound setup into a room that is 17.5 feet long, 14 feet wide, and 8 feet high. He'll be installing a 120-inch projection screen sitting 11 feet away. Dang. And the room will be fully acoustically treated. With this upgrade in room size, he was thinking he could also upgrade his front 3 speakers. He set his eye on a pair of Ascend CBM 170 SE plus the larger CMT 130, 130, where did I get that from? 340 SE center. But the CMT 340 is physically too deep and won't fit nicely where he wants to put his center. Should he get an RBH Impression or an Impression Elite center instead? Would one of those match well with his Ascends? They would match fine with your Ascends. So the 200s. The 200s are smaller? Remind me what those look like.
So the 200s are essentially, take the CBM 170, which is a single 6.5-inch driver with the 1-inch tweeter in a ported cabinet. Well, you take that, literally the exact same tweeter, but you use a pair of 4-inch drivers instead of a single 6.5-inch, and you put it in a sealed cabinet. That's what the HTM 200 SE is.
Okay.
You don't need to change your speakers at all.
You're only sitting 11 feet away.
You're only 11 feet away.
Yeah, speakers might be a little bit closer than that, depending on how you set them up.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of what I was thinking. He doesn't need to change the sub. The PB1000 is fine for this room.
Yeah, your room hasn't gotten so large,
Yeah.
and you're not sitting so much farther away that you actually need to change anything at all. No, I don't know. Maybe he was planning to expand beyond a 5.1 system, and he was like, well, my HTM200 SEs, they're sealed, they're easy to mount on the wall. I'm going to use them as my surrounds and surround backs, or maybe a pair of overhead speakers or something like that. So why don't I go ahead and get some larger speakers up front, because I'm going to get more speakers anyway. But if that's not the case, if you're just like, I figured because I've got a bigger room than I used to have that I somehow need larger speakers, you don't. The 200 SEs are entirely capable of dealing with the room size and the distance that you've now got.
The seating distance.
You haven't gone to a huge room from 20 feet away all of a sudden. That's not the case. You're still in what's considered a small room with a relatively short seating distance of 11 feet. Yeah. So honestly, you can save yourself a pile of money here and just not get any new speakers because you do not need them.
I mean, and honestly, if you to me, if you were deciding, if you're like, I want to buy new speakers anyways, I want to expand to Atmos or whatever, and there's going to be some other things going on, so I'm gonna buy new speakers. What do you guys recommend? I recommend one of two things. If you like what you got and you've been happy with it, then having fully matched speakers all the way around your room, just buy more of the 200 SEs. You know,
Yep.
Just buy more of those. But if you want to get something different, then get something different. You know what I mean? like upgrade. Don't like go, a little bit up the Ascend line. Like let's
I'm pretty sure he was looking at matching his existing HTM 200s.
But if he's replacing his front three as the soundstage, and then everything else is going to be surround backs and overhead speakers. I mean, I'm not saying go B&W or Golden Year or something like that. I'm saying, go
RBH Impression Elite.
Sure.
It's not a big difference really in
or
timbre, but
exactly, or even the going higher up the Ascend line, get something, get a major sonic upgrade, which would cost a lot more money. But
I mean, the other thing you can do is they do have center versions of the CBM 170 SEs. So I don't know if those are still physically too deep, because they're deeper than the 200 SEs are. But you don't have to get a CMT 340 just because it looks more horizontal.
Right.
You don't have to do that. You can get the center version of the CBM 170 if that physically fits, and get 3 of those. Although the difference between the CBM 170 and the HTM 200 SE is extremely slight.
All right, Adam. Adam has a receiver that tops out at 5.2.2. He's considering giving Atmos a try. It would be very easy for him to add a pair of SVS prime elevation speakers at the front of his room as front heights, but since his sidewalls are concrete, it would be a lot more effort to mount them on the sidewalls as pseudo top middles. And when it be pseudo, they would be top middles.
Yeah, but just they aren't actually directly overhead. They are on the side walls and then angled in, right? Yeah.
So given that he can only add 2 overhead speakers at the moment, is the difference between top middles and front heights so great that it'd be worthwhile? Yes. I would not do just top heights. I mean, I think front heights is just to me,
they are very not that noticeable until you're panning a sound from front to back and you go, oh yeah, okay, that clearly moved front to back.
Never in my experience have I thought, oh, the front heights are finally doing something. I've never thought that. They have 100% for sure. I've just never noticed it.
Like, I almost wish I didn't give that answer, but I completely agree. I'm like, the front heights have been the least noticeable speakers I've ever had in my system.
Yeah. And I remember when Yamaha was calling them Presence. Was it called Presence? And people would rave over them. And I'm like, really? How could it possibly make that much difference? And after having top heights, I'm like, or front heights, I'm like, yeah, I was right. You guys were all wrong.
Yeah.
So Adam is under the impression that we are not big fans of Atmos. Could we elaborate? Is it just a gimmick, or is there a lack of content? Well, there's not a lack of content anymore.
No, not anymore.
It is a gimmick, but then again, so is surround sound. And
I suppose.
So is all of this.
In the strictest definition of what a gimmick would mean, yeah.
I have not found that it's made a huge difference, and I certainly don't think it's a difference that people other than me notice in the home theater.
Your wife certainly doesn't.
No, well, my kids don't either. So the kids will notice when the subwoofers hit.
Sure.
They will notice that. The kids will notice that there's surround sound going on.
Okay.
That is something that is noticeable. The kids will notice a larger screen size or a smaller screen size. These are noticeable differences. Atmos speakers is so far, in my experience, at movie theaters, here at my house, everywhere, it's just not all that noticeable. I mean, even when you're watching A Quiet Place, which is a movie that was tailor made for Atmos, because things are walking on the ceiling constantly, and people are looking up, and we're all hearing it come from overhead. The kids don't think that has anything to do, and with my wife, with the speakers that are on our ceiling. So, you know, I am ambivalent about Atmos. People who want to do it, people who are really into this and want to have the
you're not
going to
yell at them to don't do it.
I'm not saying that it's a waste of money. What I'm saying is that if you come to me and say, I really want to give this Atmos thing a try, I'm going to say, are you sure? Because it's, you know, it can be a lot of money depending on which way you go.
It can be, yeah.
And it's not necessarily going to give you the most dramatic, you know, experience.
And we've had such a smattering of people across the spectrum of people saying, I did it and I really love it, and people saying I did it and I couldn't care less, and I kind of wish I hadn't. We've had the full spectrum of and we can understand all of those opinions. We fall within there. My personal take on Atmos is that it's one of those things where I would notice it more by its absence after having gotten used to it than noticing its presence upon having added it to my system. When I first added it, I was like, yeah, I think there's some stuff coming there. And then I did the whole thing of disconnecting everything except my Atmos speakers to make sure, they're definitely playing stuff up there. But now that I'm used to it, if you took it away, I would probably notice it more going that direction. So that's kind of where I fall on it. I'm probably a little bit bigger fan of it than Tom, but anybody who's like, money's tight, should I really like stretch my budget to get Atmos? I'm like, no, focus on getting really good 5.1 first, get 5.2, you know, that is way more important. And then if there's money left over, sure, give Atmos a try, absolutely. But I wouldn't go stretching anybody's budget for it. That's where I fall.
I feel very similar to Atmos as I do to 4K, to be honest with you. You know, it's like you're not going to notice the difference. Most people aren't going to notice the difference. Now, HDR, I'm a little bit more bullish on, but not 4K. So, how big is the difference between Atmos via streaming versus Atmos from a physical disc? Is there quality loss in the streaming version? Well, there is. I mean, there has to be.
I mean, just factually, if it's lossy,
yeah. I don't know that there's a huge difference as far as, you know, sound quality.
I mean, I've certainly heard a difference. You know, like Netflix has probably been the best quality as far as streaming goes. And I mean, according to the whole thing of they've now increased the bit rate even more. You know, that it's pretty darn tough to tell. The bit that I've heard from my Apple TV 4K downloads, which are, you know, Dolby Digital Plus lossy version, but it's a pretty high bit rate on that. And I mean, I don't know, push came to shove, maybe if I were doing a direct A/B comparison to the physical disc, there might be a difference, but it's nothing so great that I'm going, oh, that's clearly the streaming version I'm listening to versus, oh, that's clearly the disc. It's not that type of difference. If it was, you know, direct A/B, instantaneous switching between them, maybe I could hear. So I don't think the difference is huge. It can be larger from sources where they're highly compressing it, but then that's the same as any highly compressed audio.
So what about streaming regular versus a regular old 5.1 versus 5.1 on physical disc? Big noticeable differences, or can streaming be just as good? I mean, it is objectively different. But big noticeable differences? No.
Same thing. I think it comes down to what bit rate are they using. If it's a good streaming service or a good quality download where it's a high bit rate, it's nigh impossible to tell the difference.
Yeah, I agree. Streaming has just gotten so much.
It's gotten a lot better.
It's gotten so much better, you know. And honestly, it never was that bad picture, but you know, except at the very, very beginning. All right, Jim. Jim lives in Toronto.
That's a big city. Most people know Toronto.
I do know Toronto. I don't know why I said Toronto like an idiot. Toronto, Ontario. I think I put Toronto and Ontario together, and I ended up with Toronto. All right, Jim lives in Toronto, Ontario. He wants to cut the cord and drop Rogers cable service in favor of using over-the-air TV instead. What's a good over-the-air tuner that includes a DVR and will work well in Canada.
And
I
that's
don't
the
know
trick.
DVRs.
It's the working well in Canada bit of it.
Well, even DVRs these days are kind of, I mean, unless something has come out in the last couple of years, because it was what was the Leaf antenna? Is that what it's called?
Well, the Mohu Leaf is just the antenna part of it.
I know, but that doesn't get you the DVR. Like the antenna part is kind of easy to to recommend.
And I mean, you can plug the antenna directly into your HD TV and just watch television.
Right. But DVR is the issue, right?
It's the DVR part of it, yeah. So I mean, in Canada, it's tough because TiVo more or less doesn't exist here.
Okay. And they have that Romeo or whatever it's called.
Yeah, they got now it's the Bolt. So now it's the Bolt over the air.
I can't keep up with this crap.
I know, which I mean does still come as the most highly recommended in the States, but you know if you pay for the one-time fee so that you're not paying any sort of monthly fee, then you're looking at like at least $400 American, and then the service doesn't seem to exist in Canada. They kind of tuck-tailed and got out of here because the market's just not big enough. So we're left with a pretty small selection. Now you can get the Channel Master units here in Canada.
I've read really mixed reports of those things, man. When I was looking into buying a DVR for myself, I was looking at Channel Master, and I kept
I mean, what everyone likes about the Channel Master is there's no subscription fee.
Right.
There's no fee. You buy the thing. It's got a hard, or you just plug your own external hard drive into it. So make it whatever size you want at whatever price you want, and that's it. You know, you're good to go. And right now, their current box is called the Stream Plus. They don't have the Channel Master DVR Plus anymore. It's the Stream Plus now. That's the thing. It's 150 American dollars, but you can get them in Canada. They will work in Canada. And all the reports of that, it's pretty spotty. Like the guide data is all over the place. Sometimes it gives you like 7 days. It's supposed to give you 14 days. No one seems to have ever gotten 14 days of guide data. And a lot of people are like, yeah, maybe it'll populate itself about 45 minutes before the show comes on. Good luck setting your recordings ahead of time if you want to leave the house. So honestly, the best answer seems to be, and this is not a quick and simple, here's one box to get it done, but the best answer in Canada for an over-the-air DVR seems to be getting from Silicon Dust one of their HDHomeRun network tuners. Right, so the antenna plugs into the HDHomeRun, and the HDHomeRun plugs into your home network, and now that just sits there. And now you get the HDHomeRun app it's available on every smart TV, it's available on every streaming box, it's available on every smartphone. You get the HDHomeRun app, and now you can watch television on anything that's connected to your network. The antenna's plugged into the HDHomeRun, the home run's plugged into your network, and anything with the HDHomeRun app can just watch television now. Now, Silicon Dust, HDHomeRun, they offer their own DVR service. It's a service. There's a fee for it, but they offer their own DVR service. You can pay for that and use that, and it works inside of their app. Or you can also use an HDHomeRun network tuner with Plex. Okay. And Plex has their own Plex DVR service. But to use Plex DVR service, you need a Plex Pass. So that costs some money at the moment. And I mean, that's a lot more parts, right? You're talking about a network tuner and then something else that has an app, be it the HDHomeRun app or the Plex app, but some other device. It could be just your smart TV because Plex apps and HDHomeRun apps are available for all of them. But you get that, and then you'd have to set up either the HDHomeRun DVR service or the Plex DVR service with a Plex Pass. But that's kind of your best option in Canada. In fact, for a lot of people in the States, it's still the best option.
So the DVR software or whatever is $35 a year?
That's right. I mean, it's not, it's certainly cheaper than TiVo was.
Yeah, that's
and that gets you your guide data and lets you actually use it outside of your house. You can send it from your own DVR at home out of your house over the internet. So it gives you some nice features. Plex can do a similar thing.
All right, there you go. Dan has ELAC. Dan on Twitter. Dan has ELAC tower speakers for his front, left, and right, but he only has space for a very slim top to bottom center speaker, so he's been using a Bose Slim Center that he isn't exactly thrilled with. Would the new JBL Stage Series Slim Center do a better job and match more closely to the timbre of his ELAC towers?
I mean, a flat out yes at first, because that Bose Slim Center is terrible.
Yeah. Okay, so will it do a better job? Yes. Will it match more closely? Probably yes.
Probably yes. I wouldn't expect a perfect timbre match.
No, I don't.
But
I
better
think
than the Bose.
You would definitely be going up as
Yes.
far as sound quality
This
goes.
would be an improvement. Yes.
Can we not have a? Do we just skip the center channel? Because that
Just do a Phantom?
Just do a Phantom, because that would probably sound, if you're sitting between the speakers, the best out of these three options. Two options.
You can easily give a Phantom a try because that costs you nothing. So give a Phantom a try. If you're like, nah, I've got to be able to change the center channel independent of my front, left, right. I just have to be able to do that. Or I am sitting off axis and the stereo imaging isn't good enough with a Phantom center. I mean, these are legitimate reasons. They, you know, it absolutely could be the case. And you just have to have something that's physically this small. I mean, yeah, the JBL stage is going to be better than the Bose.
I think so.
Yeah.
All right. Carlos, what are our top 3 discs for bass, preferably 4K discs in any particular scenes? Top 3 scenes for bass.
Do you want to think about that? Will I give
mine's all old stuff, so I don't really feel like I've
Old
got
is fine.
much to offer here.
4K discs in particular.
Well, I don't have that many 4K. I'd have to literally go out there and look at them.
Well, you would probably say A Quiet Place.
I would. I don't know if... I mean, the bass is not... It's not.
But as an audio demonstration,
as an audio demonstration, that would be good. The early scene when the kids drop the lantern, would be a good one for Atmos and surround sound, and there is bass in there.
Would you say Jurassic Park?
The first Jurassic Park remixed,
the
remaster, 4K remaster, the opening scene with the Velociraptor eating the dude as they were trying to get him in the cage. That would be a good one.
All right.
Let me think what else. You go.
All right. So, I mean, I'll say for mine, Blade Runner 2049. I don't know if I can give you a particular scene. The whole darn thing is a great Atmos and bass demonstration. So, Blade Runner 2049. The Dark Knight Rises, I always point out because it has my favorite subtle bass at the very, very beginning when the Batman logo kind of cracks into the ice. Right underneath that, there's this really subtle, it's not actually a heartbeat, but it's reminiscent of a heartbeat, and it's really low, and it's really subtle and quiet, and it's a good way to see, are my subs actually playing that low, and is that sound not being masked, if you haven't ever noticed that reminiscent of a heartbeat beat going on there. And then I'm going to give a horrible movie a particular scene on 4K disc for bass, which is I can't stand even saying it, but Transformers Age of Extinction, which is
that Sonic guy, that guy shows up in was it London or something? Is that what it is?
No, it's this is the his name was in my head and now it's gone out of my head and I really don't care. What's that guy's, the guy who's like the best friend in Deadpool, the guy who runs the bar, that actor?
He's also, he got devoured by the Me Too movement.
Yes, but anyway, that guy, he's in Transformers Age of Extinction, at least early in the movie, and I don't care about spoiling Transformers Age of Extinction for you. That dude dies, all right? So that guy, the scene where he dies is when, what the heck is it, Lockdown? I think Lockdown is the new villain.
I don't know.
Robot.
He's a bad guy, yeah.
Anyway, the dude shows up and he has this like ship that shoots this weapon thing that like turns anything that it hits into like Cybertron stuff.
It absolutely destroys your subwoofers, man. That scene is in-freaking-sane.
That scene is ridiculous for bass, okay? You want a bass demonstration in a particular scene? There you go. Transformers Age of Extinction, that scene is stupid, and the whole movie is terrible, don't get it, but there's a scene. You can't deny that that's a bass demo scene.
So yeah, I can watch like there's the most recent one, The Last Night or something like that, which is, I guess they go back in time.
I think so, yeah. Well, I mean, the most recent one is Bumblebee, which I haven't seen yet. But
I've heard Bumblebee is good. I would watch Bumblebee.
Because it's not directed by Michael Bay.
Not directed by Michael Bay. Let's start with that. I actually saw Lindsay Ellis broke down why Michael Bay movies are impossible to watch and enjoy, or why you can't remember them. And it has to do with how he frames shots. And I was like, I finally get it. Like, finally understand why I cannot like these movies, and it's interesting. Let me keep thinking about this 4K thing, because A Quiet Place for overheads, Jurassic Park for the very beginning there is really good, and the whole movie is actually pretty well done.
Well, if you want to borrow my fourth pick, it's Black Hawk Down.
I don't really like
Black Hawk Down is a fantastic demo disc.
All right, whatever.
There.
Oh my god, I am so sick of coughing.
Yep.
Travis has a bedroom setup in which he uses an LG TV with an Oppo 203 and NVIDIA Shield plugged into Oppo's HDMI input and a pair of Mackie self-powered monitors. For music and YouTube and most TV shows, it sounds great and he enjoys the setup, but for a lot of movies, with all the sounds being down-mixed to just his pair of self-powered monitors, it seems as though his dialogue is getting masked by all of the sound effects and other sounds. If he cranks up the volume, you can hear the dialogue, but then it's uncomfortable as everything else is so loud. He doesn't have an AV receiver, but since he's using self-powered speakers, his Oppo 203 with its full set of analog pre-outs and speaker output settings, as well as individual trim levels and overall volume control, seems to function well as a preamp. So could he add a third self-powered monitor as a center? Do we think that would help with this movie dialogue issues? Do we know that it's 100% down mixing? I mean, it is outputting analog 2-channel and not analog 5.1?
Oh yeah, definitely, because you have the option within the Oppo to downmix everything to 2-channel, which is what he set it to do.
That's good, because I mean, the thing that immediately came to my mind is when you're coming to movies, maybe he's only getting left and right, so
front,
it's giving
left, right.
Yeah, and he's not getting as much dialogue because most of the dialogue is mixed into the center.
I have noticed a lot of movies and even television content these days, for some reason, they are tending to mix the dialogue lower than even I would like. That has been quite a common modern mixing thing for some reason.
It's interesting. It's an interesting experience that you're having here, and not something that I'm super familiar with that I've noticed myself, but Rob has, obviously. So the answer really is to get a center channel so that you can individually bump up the dialogue to your liking. And
I mean, within the Oppo, you can tell it to make the trim level of the center output louder than the front, left, right. So yeah, I'm all for this. That will absolutely work. And using your 203 as a preamp is an entirely valid way to come at this. You know, it doesn't have amplifiers built in, so you have to have external amps of some type, but you're using self-powered speakers, so that counts. That works.
So at the moment, he has all of his sources set to output 2-channel stereo audio. When he adds the center speaker, should he set his sources to output 5.1? He does not want to add any surround speakers, and Oppo's options are to downmix either stereo or 5.1. So if he sets the Oppo to 5.1 and he only has front, left, right speakers in the center, will he be losing the surround channels? I mean, I think you will, yeah. I mean, I think that's how that works.
Well, I mean, within the Oppo, it has, I mean, essentially like what an AV receiver has, right? Where you tell it, I mean, it basically goes by setting what are the sizes of each of my speakers, but you can set the surrounds to none. Right?
Well, there you go. That should fix it.
So at that point, it then just sends whatever sound. So, I mean, having your source output 5.1 to begin with, yes, because that gives you discrete channels, and we want a discrete center channel for sure. So, yes, your sources should be outputting 5.1 to begin with. You then tell your Oppo that I have 5.1, because, I mean, you're certainly not going to tell it I have 7.1. Right. You're going to tell it I have 5.1, but then in the speaker setup of the Oppo, you're going to say, I have no surround speakers. You're just going to set those to none, and then it will send their sounds into your front, left, and right speakers as normal. So you shouldn't actually be losing any sound. But you do want to set everything to 5.1 as the starting point, and then it's just up to the actual speaker setup menu in the Oppo to say, no, I only have these front three. My surrounds are set to none.
Okay. Chad set up his NVIDIA Shield as a Plex server. He's plugged in an external USB hard drive and set that up as a storage location, but now he's running out of space. The Shield has 2 USB ports. Can he plug in a second external USB drive? I think that's the whole idea, right? That you can just daisy chain these things together.
I mean, you absolutely can just plug in a second USB drive. I would say, though, the NVIDIA Shield does not have a ton of built-in storage.
Right.
Just within itself. I think it's 16 gigabytes in the regular Shield. And when you set up your NVIDIA Shield as a Plex server, all of the metadata, including like the album art or the cover photos and the posters and stuff like that, that stuff all gets stored on the Shield itself. And it's pretty easy if you have a fairly large Plex library to actually fill up that internal storage, because that internal storage is being shared by the operating system and the data for all of your other apps on your Shield, and then all of that metadata as well. And 16 gigs goes away pretty quick. So what I've done with the 2 USB inputs on my Shield is one of them I just plugged in a small little USB, a metal USB stick because they get hot. They you need something that is going to wick that heat away and act as a heat sink basically. So I got a metal USB stick which you can format as internal storage. It uses it as though it were internal storage, which is not what you would do with like a regular spinning external hard drive. You wouldn't set that as internal storage. It'll only work with solid state, like a USB stick. So I just question. I mean, if you're, I mean, it's not, if you all he's been using right now is a single external USB drive. His Plex library is probably not so large that he's worried about metadata storage space. But now that it's expanding, I'm like, I don't know if we want to go and make sure that both of those USB ports are taken up by external hard drives, and you don't have the ability to expand your internal storage.
So could he buy a larger or like a small RAID array or something like that, and then transfer what he's got onto there? And
yeah, I mean, you could actually just get a USB hub.
Yeah.
Because then you can just plug various USB external drives into your hub and the one output from the hub into one of the Shield. So, I mean, first of all, could he just plug in a second external USB drive? Yes. I mean, that's the flat answer. Yes, you could. But then when it's time to expand again, or if you're starting to run out of internal storage space, you're going to have to do something now that could be as simple as a USB hub. That could work. Make sure it's a self-powered hub, one of the hubs that you actually plug into a wall. You don't want a passive hub for this purpose. But the one that I like better is to move over to network storage, right? Because once you have storage on your network, then as long as you've got your NVIDIA Shield plugged into your network, I would go with a hardwired connection for this type of stuff as opposed to relying on Wi-Fi.
Sure.
But once you have your NVIDIA Shield plugged into your network and you have your network storage also plugged into your network, then you can expand to your heart's content. So I prefer that if you're finding that you've got a growing Plex library, invest in some network storage would be my recommendation, but you absolutely can just plug in a second drive at this point.
Okay. So could he have TV shows on one hard drive and movies on the other? Would that work? Will there be any issues with his existing metadata from when he was only using one hard drive? I don't understand why you... I mean, I don't understand the point of having movies on one and TV shows on the other.
I mean, maybe it's just for his own mind organization in his mind, but you absolutely do not need to do this at all. You can have oodles of storage locations.
Yeah.
All you have to do is, now with the NVIDIA Shield, to manage your Plex server on the Shield, you do have to go into the web interface on a laptop or a desktop PC. You can't manage the Plex server on the NVIDIA Shield itself, just through its remote. You do have to go into the web interface, but when you go into the web interface and say, right now I am managing my Plex Shield Plex server, or my NVIDIA Shield Plex server, you can point it to whatever storage you want to. You can point it to the storage that's plugged in via USB to the Shield itself, or point it to a network drive location, or point it to a location that's on your PC that is shared on the network. Like anywhere the storage is, as long as the NVIDIA Shield can get to it somehow over the network or through a USB connection, you can point your Plex server to look there for content. You could have movies stored on 15 different drives, all connected to your network in different places in your house, and it'll still all come in and populate.
Right.
So there's absolutely no reason that you need to organize it this way unless it's just for your own head. And if you do, that's fine. It'll absolutely work. When you move, like let's say, you've got some TV shows on your one hard drive right now and you're going to move all of those over. When you move all of them over, you just say, update my Plex library in the Plex server software, and it'll update it and say, oh, that's the new location for this file that's already in my library. And there it is. No problem at all.
I really don't understand. I mean, I don't have a Plex server. I'm not interested in backing up everything online and dealing with all that nonsense. It's just too much for me right now. Maybe when my kids move out and I have more free time. Mm-hmm. But for me, if you're going to go through the trouble of backing up all this stuff, not having a RAID array and just using a regular hard drive just seems irresponsible. You know what I mean? I feel for the extra expenditure of money, which is not significant, really. Not when you can compare it to, you need a tera. It's just basically a couple of extra drives and the thing. I mean, it's not a huge difference in what you're spending. The ability to one drive crashes and you just pull it out and slap another one in, and you haven't lost anything. I mean, that peace of mind is definitely worth the extra cost. So I would think, if I were this guy, I would look at Chad here. I would look at getting a RAID array and
getting an NAS
and putting it on the network. At the very least, getting a hub and plugging the NAS into plugging a RAID array into that. If you can't do that, then if you can get a network one, that's even better. All right, Alvin. Alvin went with the Onkyo. We already talked about this. TXRZ730 receiver, so they can get full 7.2.4 Atmos configuration to try. He is in a rental, so installing in-ceiling speakers or making any large holes is a no-go. He has shelves both at the front and back of his room, so he's just using those for the moment to house his front heights and rear height speakers. He's using Klipsch Icon speakers. He has 2 pairs of the VF35 towers, which he's using as front, left, and right, and surrounds. He's got matching VC25 center, and he's using a pair of VB15 bookshelf speakers as his surround backs. High up on the shelves, he's using Klipsch Quintet satellite speakers as front heights and rear heights. He owns a second pair of VB15 bookshelf speakers, so would be using the 4 VB15 bookshelf speakers as front heights and rear heights sound better than the Quintet speakers. The Onkyo automatically set 180 hertz crossover frequency for the Quintets, so would using a bigger bookshelf speakers up there help to better match the rest of us? I don't think so. The Atmos speakers get crossed over very, very high anyway, so they don't get a lot of content.
I mean, they certainly can. If they were Atmos enabled upward firing, they'd be crossed at 200,
right?
Because that's just where they cross.
Yeah.
Atmos enabled ones. Yeah, I mean, there's nothing about your current setup where I'm like, oh, you got to take your surround backs down from where they are and pull your other pair of VB15s from the other setup where you're using them and use those as your 4 overheads. Absolutely not. I mean, they're your speakers. None of these things are like so mounted that, there's no way of putting them back. So you could, of course, just give it a try. But there's nothing about this where I'm like, oh, yes, you absolutely must try that. I think it'll be a big improvement.
You put the small speakers doing the smallest jobs and the larger speakers doing the larger jobs. I think you've set this up exactly the way I would do it.
Yep.
I've got no problems with what you've done.
I mean, the only change I could potentially see is if your tower surrounds are somehow inconvenient, you could use the second pair of VB15s as your surrounds, your side surrounds.
Well, yeah, you could definitely get them more optimally located. But maybe that's not an issue here. Maybe that's not an issue.
But if the tower surrounds are actually more convenient for you in some way, there's not a reason to change that either.
If these were all my speakers, my first thought would be sell the tower surrounds, mount the bookshelf speakers, or place surrounds. Them as surrounds, and that would be literally the only change I would make.
Maybe. Right. Yeah.
Since he is just using his existing shelves to hold his height speakers at present, they are just aiming straight forward. Would it be worth his while to get some brackets so they can be angled and aiming more towards the seats? I'm going to say no.
Okay.
I don't necessarily think it's going to make a humongous... These are Atmos speakers, and I don't know... He didn't say how big his room was. So my vision is that they are at least 6 to 8, at least 8 feet away from you, the front wall, back wall, 6 to 8 feet either way. In which case, I think the angle, you're still sitting within the cone of its optimal, frequency response. Especially the front ones, I would doubt that you would need to angle them down. Maybe the back ones, if you're sitting quite a bit closer to the back wall, if you're like 4 feet from the back wall, I would angle them down. I could see you doing this with like a doorstop.
Yeah, I mean the Quintets are really small and light, so I thought they came with some kind of bracket, to be honest, because most of those, like these, the reason they're called Quintet is because they come in the little 5.1 package. These are a little subsat system, almost like a home theater in a box, but without a receiver included.
They usually have some sort of like wall mount that you can aim things with.
I thought they did, but maybe they don't. Maybe they just have the mounting thing on the back.
The keyhole mount.
They definitely can be easily mounted. Because I mean, you wouldn't have to get expensive mounts to do this because they're really light. They're really small and light speakers. You don't need anything that hold a tremendous amount of weight. You can get those, what were those like $5 wall mounts off of Amazon? The ones that just go into a little keyhole mount.
Yeah,
and they're only meant to hold like 5 pounds, but that'd be fine for the quintets.
Right, for the quintets it would be.
So
fine.
I mean, if this is not a big deal, it certainly doesn't have to be an expensive thing to do. And when it's front heights and rear heights, I am sort of in favor of angling them at you. I mean, I'm come see, come saw about it because I'm not like, oh, you got to, but at the same time, I wouldn't be against it in any way. So I'm very in the middle.
Like I said, for me, it depends on how close he's sitting to the speakers. If
agreed.
In my room, I'm about 8 feet from my front wall, and mine are mounted very high because they're the prime satellites, prime elevation speakers, so they are angled naturally. If you had them mounted that high at that distance, I would want them angled a little bit.
Okay,
but if they're on a normal bookshelf and you're still within like 30 degrees of that tweeter, I'd be like, whatever. It's probably not going to make a difference.
All right, I can go with that.
All right, in the Onkyo's manual and in the setup menus, it says that if you're using 7.2.4 configuration, you have to plug the surround back pre-outs into an external amp while the receiver powers the other 9 speakers. He has done that using a little 40-watt amp for his surround backs, but is there a way to reassign which speakers are powered externally? He'd rather power his front, left, right speakers with an external amp for the time being. Well, if that's what it says, then no. And honestly, you have clipped speakers. You don't need 40 watts.
Also
is
true.
Way too much for any clipped speaker at any distance. Almost.
I'm sure that's one of those little Class D, 40 watt Dealies, which is totally fine.
Yeah. No.
I mean, the thing is, you can power any of the speakers externally at any time. All the pre-outs are always hot. So if you just want to power your front, left, right, and center right now, you can do that, but
you have to power the surround backs in order
the surround backs, if it's 7.2.4, the surround backs have to be powered externally. They don't give you a choice. So 2 out of the 11 speakers have to be powered externally. Somehow, in your case, they always have to be the surround backs.
And like with my receiver, my Denon, it's if you want to do 7.2.4, then you can either choose the front, left, and rights, or the surround the top middles. There's no other options.
Yeah,
there.
there's no way to choose, say, your top fronts as being the only ones out of the 11 that must be powered externally. Again, you're choosing a pair that have to be powered externally because the other 9 can be powered internally or externally. You can do either or with all the other 9 speakers, but 2 of them have to be external. But yeah, in your case with this Onkyo, you got no choice. It's the surround backs.
Michael on Twitter. Michael came across a suggestion that it is best to turn the volume knob on your sub up as high as you reasonably can while turning the trim level in your receiver down a corresponding amount to achieve the proper output level. That person is not smart. The explanation given is that turning down the volume knob on the sub itself is like placing a limiter on the subwoofer's output. That seemed to make sense to Michael on the face of it, but what do we say? That doesn't make literally any sense to me whatsoever.
That is not the case of what is going on.
Well, not only that, limiting the output of your receiver, putting the trim level down very low can oftentimes interfere with the operation of your sub because it doesn't happen that often.
It's such a low signal now coming out of this lowered trim level receiver.
So if you end up using your subwoofer with like the auto on, waiting for a signal to come in,
certainly with the auto on sensing,
it will not sense the voltage coming in. It will not kick on until something loud plays. It will not come on because you've turned the trim level down so low. This is not a good suggestion.
No, and it's not the way it works. It's not as though turning the volume knob on your subwoofer down somehow places a cap on how loud it can play.
That's not how that works.
No. Because what we have is a voltage signal that at some point gets sent to the amplifier, all right? And that voltage signal is like instructions to the amplifier that causes that amplifier to request however much current it needs to respond to the voltage in that signal. So the trim level coming out of your receiver just raises or lowers the voltage of the signal. That's what the trim level does. The volume knob on the back of your subwoofer also just raises or lowers the voltage of the signal. They are both gain adjustments. Gain is just like thinking of it as the amplification of the voltage alone. Just isolate the voltage in the signal. That is what the gain is attenuating or boosting. That's what the volume knob does. That's what the trim level does. So it doesn't matter particularly where you do it. You end up with the same voltage signal being sent to the amplifier. So it doesn't matter. I mean, you can turn up the trim level in your AV receiver and then turn down the volume knob on your subwoofer a corresponding amount, and you still end up with the same voltage reaching the amplifier. And that's ultimately what matters. And as long as that voltage signal is saying, play me something that this amplifier can deliver, you can go all the way up to the maximum amount that subwoofer can output.
Right.
So, yeah.
And honestly, if I were going to err on the side of plus or minus on the trim level knob, I would err a couple dB high. I would rather it be a little bit plus than a little bit minus. And if I saw it -12 or -10 or whatever is, and I would be extremely concerned about that. That's not something that you want to see. It's unlikely in most modern subwoofers to make a difference, but it is not an issue that has not happened on this. Not an issue that has not. It is an issue that we have dealt with on this podcast before, where people are like, my subwoofer won't turn on, and I don't know why, and their trim levels are really low.
If the volume knob on the sub were somehow attenuating the current that can be sent, that would be a different case, but it's not. This is all in the gain stage. This is all in the voltage stage, and the voltage that reaches the amplifier is the same in either case. Yeah. So that is not advice. That was faulty logic.
So Michael's receiver is a Denon X2100W, old enough that it cannot use the Odyssey editor app. It has Odyssey Multi-2 EQ XT, and his options for target curves are off, a left-right bypass, reference, or flat. He toggles back and forth with all of them. It seems to him that either reference or flat settings muddy some of the nuance in the treble, as though he has to strain to hear certain details that are easier to pick up if he uses a left-right bypass or if he just puts the receiver into direct listening mode. With upgrading to a model with XT32 fix this is all about having greater filter resolution. What was our experience going from XT to XT32 worth it? I don't know that going to XT32 is going to make a humongous difference in this respect. This sounds more like a room. Well, the editor app would allow you to.
Editor app is actually the thing you want.
Would allow you to not have like the little roll off they tend to do at the top there.
Yeah, and it would take out the little 2 kilohertz notch filter, and you could just say, hey, don't EQ anything above 500 hertz, let's say. I mean, you pick an arbitrary number, but, some people are like, don't do anything above the transition frequency of the room, which is probably 200 or 250 hertz. Some people say, oh, double the transition frequency around 500 hertz, that's fine. Some people are like, oh, go all the way up to 5 kilohertz. Whatever it is, you can pick the number, but you can't do that right now. You could if you had the Odyssey editor app, and that could actually make the bigger difference as opposed to just going from XT to XT32.
And that's kind of my thought here is that my experience going from XT to XT32 wasn't so dramatic in hearing different treble and that sort of thing. It was more, some of the options that you had lower, lower in the frequency response. And we care
a lot more about EQing the bass than anything else. That's what we care about the most. So the more filter resolution, the more attention that it pays to the bass, the happier we are with that. That's what we care about most. I mean, I would say I noticed a difference in the treble, a clear difference in the treble going from regular multi-EQ to XT.
Yeah.
Because regular multi-EQ had so few filters in the treble that I felt like it was doing more harm than good. I mean, when people are critical of Odyssey, sometimes I'm like, I bet the only experience they had was original multi-EQ. That wouldn't shock me at all.
Right.
The difference in the treble going from XT, in my experience of it, going from XT to XT32, like Tom, it's not something so noticeable that I really made a note of it. So I think in your case, Michael, what would benefit you the most would actually be the editor app, because then at least you could retain all of that lovely EQ in the bass. You're not having to bypass stuff or go to direct mode, but then you could say, hey, just don't EQ above whatever, 500 hertz or something like that, and it gets rid of the treble stuff that you don't seem to like.
Yeah. So he did some experimenting and discovered that he prefers setting Odyssey Dynamic EQ to one of the offset options, often -10 dB or -15 dB, especially for music. Having it at the default 0 dB setting was fun at first, but it was unnaturally boosting the bass. So what's the deal there? I'm really wondering about how he ran the auto setup.
Oh no, this can be entirely the case. That reference level offset within dynamic EQ, which is confusing. The language on it doesn't make it super clear what's going on there. So you can think of it this way. Dynamic EQ, if you have it the reference level offset set to 0 dB, which is the default, and you have your master volume set to 0 dB, nothing is happening.
Nothing's happening there.
Dynamic EQ is doing nothing at that point. Now, if you have the reference level offset set to 0 dB, which is the default, and then you turn the master volume down to, let's say, -15 on the master volume dial, now it will be saying, okay, we are 15 decibels below full reference volume on the master volume dial, and the reference level offset within dynamic EQ was set to 0 dB. It was set to full reference volume. Now I need to boost the bass because we're below full reference volume. So to keep all the bass audible, I need to boost the bass up. Now, if you set the reference level offset to something, I think there are 3 options, -5, -10, and -15. What that says is, okay, I now have the reference level offset, let's say, set to -10 dB. Now I go and I turn the master volume dial down to -10 dB. At that point, dynamic EQ is doing nothing.
Nothing, right.
Because you have offset where dynamic EQ begins to start boosting things. You're saying, don't boost anything at -10 upward. Only start to boost things below -10 dB on the master volume dial. That's what the reference level offset is there for. And now music is sometimes mastered at 120 decibels.
Right.
Because that's like concert volume level. It's not mastered at 105 dB peaks. It's mastered 15 decibels higher at 120 decibel peaks, which means setting the reference level offset to -15 might make all the sense in the world, because you actually want to listen on the master volume dial at -15. Otherwise, you're getting 120 decibel peaks at 0 dB on the master volume dial.
Many people would consider that to be loud. Yeah.
Rock concert in about the 5th row levels, right? 120 decibels. So you've got the master volume dial for music that was mastered at 120 decibels, or like Dr. Dre, that's what he listens at, is 120 decibels, which is why beats sound so terrible, because the man is deaf.
I was going to say, if he's not deaf now, he will be.
So you've now turned the master volume dial down to, say, -15, and then you set the reference level offset to -15, because you're saying, don't boost anything. I'm at the perfect level right here. Dynamic EQ, don't you do anything right now. So that's what's going on there. And that particularly for music, yeah, that makes all the sense in the world.
And this is funny too, because this is something I've never run into, So that's why my first thought was maybe there was something going on with the auto setup, because in my setup, I've never run into this. Well, how many times do I listen to music in this home theater? 0. Is so far.
Well, that would do it.
So far has been my experience. And when I do listen to music, it is almost always a Blu-ray, a concert DVD, which is going to be mixed completely different than what you're talking about.
Right.
So
yeah, Blu-ray DVD is mastered to movie reference levels.
Right. So it's good that these questions get asked, and that there's 2 of us here to answer them. Because I mean, like I said, I'd say I'm wrong all the time. My experience would have been, your setup's all screwed up. You don't know what you're doing. Let's try to reset. Let's try to reset all this stuff. And because 0 dB on mine is perfect. I've never thought to change that. I've never thought the bass is too hot. Even when I turn it down, it sounds absolutely natural in here. To me, it sounds absolutely natural. And I listen at -30 on the regular.
Sure.
So,
which means dynamic EQ is doing quite a bit in the bass to keep it audible.
But it sounds absolutely natural. It doesn't bother my wife. Which if I turn it up to closer to reference volume, she will absolutely come out here and say, "Listen, I'm trying to sleep, idiot. Turn it. How many times do you have to watch Infinity War? One more time. That's how many times. At least once more.
At least once more, my dear. Yup."
So it's good that Rob's here to offer that, because I would not have answered your question correctly. So in an AV receiver, is each channel allocated some certain amount of watts, or do all of the amplifier channels draw from a pool? For example, let's say you have a 7-watt AV receiver rated 100 watts per channel. Is there a 700-watt pools of watts sitting there, any one channel can draw as much as possible. Is there some sort of cap on how much each single channel could draw from that 700 watt pool, or does each channel just have 100 watts available to it and that's it? It's first of all, those numbers that you're saying, that they're saying 100 watts per channel, you have to look at how they got that number, because it's almost not.
It's kind of none of the options that he gave, but also a little bit of each of the options that he gave.
So there is so to kind of describe it, there is a huge, not huge, but there is a single power transformer.
There's one big old power supply.
Okay, and that power supply powers all the channels. So in that way, there is a huge amount of watts ready for everybody.
Sure.
Okay, available for everybody. But then in between, there's capacitors that get filled up, and capacitors may be assigned to channels or specific areas or whatever.
And each amplifier channel has output transistors that have a certain limit of how much power can pass through those output transistors on each individual channel.
So when they say they're doing 100 watts per channel, it's
I mean, for AV receivers, that's usually 2 channels driven, right? They usually say 100 watts per channel, 2 channels driven.
Into 8 ohms, hopefully.
Into 8 ohms, usually. Usually.
So, therefore, when you're driving all channels driven, you're never going to get 100 watts per channel, all channels driven. Again, of course, you're never going to need 100 watts per channel, all channels driven. But
you really should, not with any regular actual content.
But I'm sure there's an actual answer for this question. That's just sort of the overview. Right.
So, I mean, in concept, there is sort of a central pool. Like we said, there's this one power supply that's powering the whole unit, including all of the amplifier channels. So there is sort of this one central pool. And then, yes, each of the channels. So let's take the example. It's a 7-channel amplifier, 7-channel AV receiver, and it's rated at 100 watts per channel into 2 channels. All right. Now, you're saying, what if I wanted to drive all 7 of the channels equally? What is the actual total amount of power that's available? Is it 200 watts because you only rated it at 200 watts into 2 channels, or is it something more or less than that? Well, to get a good ballpark, this might not be the exact number, but it gets you real close, is you take the rated power, 100 watts into 2 channels driven, and you say, okay, that's at least 200 watts there. And then there is typically, if you take however many channels are remaining, in this case, out of a 7-channel amplifier, there are 5 remaining channels. You say, okay, you take a quarter of the rated amplifier power, so 25 watts into those remaining 5 channels each, giving you a total amount of power that this receiver could possibly put out simultaneously is about 325 watts. That'll get you really close to the ballpark usually. Now, you might also notice on some AV receivers that have this rating present in their specifications, a 1-channel driven into the lowest impedance that it's rated for rating.
Right.
And that'll very often be about the same as whatever this calculation we've come up with of taking the rated power into 2 channels and then a quarter of that power into the remaining channels. So, like, if you look at some of the Marantzes, they'll say, like, yep, 100 watts per channel into 2 channels driven, and then it'll say 1 channel into 4 watts, 300 watts or something like that. And those 2 numbers are pretty close. So the 1-channel rating, if it's there, gives you a good idea of the maximum amount of power that could possibly go through 1 channel through its output transistors. There is a limit, and it usually isn't the entire available pool. Sometimes it could be, but it usually isn't. So you can't just say, oh, there's this one central pool and any one channel could output all of that if that's the only channel playing. There's usually a limit based on the output transistors. And then you say, well, how much could go into all 7 of these simultaneously? Well, there is kind of this central pool, and it's not 7 times 100 that then gets divided. In this case, it'd be like 46 watts per channel if they were 100% equal.
All right.
So little of each.
All right, we have time for one more question. I have to leave this house at 11:30 to go get my son from camp. So it's not camp. It's some sort of SAT prep course, which yesterday he spent the entire day on Reddit. So they're getting ready for the SAT so far. Dave got a new LG OLED. Its only audio output besides HDMI ARC is optical. He uses a soundbar that only has coax digital audio input. He's seen many different optical to coax audio converters on Amazon, but do they add lag to the signal that would create lip sync issues? Is there a particular one that we would recommend? I don't think that I've ever thought about lag in this case, but I would be surprised if it added a huge amount.
I mean, for a digital signal and you're just converting from optical to coax.
I mean, can't imagine that it's more than like 1 millisecond or something like that.
Right.
I mean, it's super fast.
Technically, there probably is some tiny amount of latency just for the conversion, but yeah, it should be really, really tiny. Although, I mean, I've seen some reviews where people are like, "Oh, the lip sync have ended up getting out of sync after like 4 hours of continuous use or something." Like, that's probably not even a latency issue. That's if it's gradually getting worse. That seems like it's something else. As though it's a signal lock that's having to go on and off. Like it's not locking to the optical signal properly. In any case, I would point you to over at Amazon. There are oodles of these things,
right?
But in a case like this, where this is a very simple device, and they're probably all based off of the same little part out of Shenzhen or something like that.
It's all OEM'd from the same thing. Yes, it's everybody slaps their name on it.
Exactly, but I do tend to, in these type of cases, go for the one that they have marked as Amazon's choice.
Okay.
Because usually what happens, the reason why they'll pick one as Amazon's choice, I mean, sometimes it's just that they're getting a good deal on it, but very often, whatever one they don't get returned to them all the bloody time. I mean, that's certainly been when I was getting iPhone batteries and stuff. Like, I went for some because I'm like, oh, this one's like $2 cheaper or whatever. I basically have never had a problem going with the one that's been marked as Amazon's choice. And I've had oodles of problems with the ones that weren't. So I'm like, I'll just go for the one that's marked Amazon's choice. Now,
that's a good
this one,
hint. I did not know that.
This one, it's $18, so I don't think it's killing you.
No.
I mean, there were some that were like $16. You know what? I'll get the Amazon's choice for $18. It has a high customer rating where everyone's like, yeah, it works. It does what it says on the tin. And this one's bi-directional. You can choose whether it goes optical to coax or coax to optical. So who knows? Maybe in the future you need to go the other way, and it can do that too. So yeah, we'll have the link for that. Or you can just head to Amazon.com and put this in and pick the one that's Amazon's
Bi-directional.
choice.
We don't support that kind of lifestyle around here.
We sure do.
Oh, that's right.
We are all for it.
We
are not those people.
Yeah.
I'm 100% in favor.
Bi-directional signal.
Of bi-directional optical to coax or coax to optical.
That's right. We don't care.
Heck, go coax to analog. Go nuts.
Go nuts. All right. Who we got left?
Well, we've got some long questions left, but not a ton of people. So we've got Josh, who is now FOMO Josh. He's no longer Anaheim Josh.
Nope.
He's FOMO Josh.
Not
now.
off the ledge Josh, not Anaheim
Nope.
Josh. He's FOMO Josh.
That's your name now. Joe K, Robin K, and Tate L. I think that's it. Yep, that's it. Them's the 4 people on the list.
I want to thank our 81 patrons over at patreon.com, including Travis. And we want to thank Alvin for talking us up to accessories for less.
Yeah, so that's patreon.com/AVRant podcast. If you'd like to sign up, think of it as an automatic monthly donation. Thanks to our 81 patrons over there, including Travis. If you'd like to make a one-time donation, come to the website, avrant.com. On the right-hand side, click Support AVRant, and it'll take you to PayPal. And Alvin, congrats on your RZ730 Onkyo receiver purchase, and thanks for talking us up to accessories for less.
For AVRant, I'm Tom Andry.
And I'm Rob H. Now go out and listen to something.
Want your question answered? Send it to question@avrant.com. This is AVRant.
Now go out and listen to something.